Her name was Chloe Sterling. She was 18 years old, and on the night that should have been the brightest moment of her life, she had to blow out the candles on her own graduation cake inside a house with every light turned off. The Portland rain lashed against the windows. The white frosting on the kitchen table had begun to soften and melt. The words congratulating the valedictorian were still written across the cake, but no one was there to read them. Chloe's phone lit up. Her mother's message contained only one sentence: "Your brother is having a crisis. This party is not that important, Chloe." She stared at the screen for a long time. She did not cry. She simply lowered her head and blew out each candle. As the final flame disappeared, Chloe felt an invisible cord inside her heart finally snap. For years, she had lived like a shadow beneath a spotlight reserved entirely for Julian. It was family favoritism disguised beneath beautiful excuses. Julian was 21 years old, and his parents described him as a programming genius with a sensitive soul. Richard proudly told visitors at the art gallery that his son was developing a product that could transform the technology industry. No one mentioned that Julian had dropped out of college after his first semester. No one said that he slept until noon, played video games until dawn, and abandoned every project the moment someone asked him to take responsibility. Julian had his own private studio and a new computer. Chloe studied in a sweltering attic where rainwater often blew across her desk. The laptop she used was one Julian had thrown away, with a purple line running vertically down the screen, but Chloe never complained. She studied while the rest of the house slept, revised her essays to the rattling sound of an old fan, and hid her exhaustion behind a silence her parents mistook for obedience. What they did not know was that Chloe had applied to a prestigious university in Seattle entirely on her own. She wrote her own essays, requested her own recommendation letters, and completed every part of the application process without their help. 3 weeks before graduation, a thick envelope arrived at her school. Chloe had earned a full scholarship. Her tuition, housing, and books would all be covered. She kept it a secret because some part of her still hoped that her parents might finally see her, even if only once. She hung the lights in the backyard herself, ordered the cake, and wrote every invitation. Chloe believed that on that night, she would finally step out of the shadows. But shortly before the party, Julian came home like a storm. He had just been fired from his internship for insulting his supervisor and failing to complete his work. The front door slammed against the wall. A ceramic vase shattered across the floor. Julian kicked over a chair, hurled his phone at the wall, and screamed that everyone was conspiring against him. Richard immediately called the guests and canceled the party. Diana tore down the lights in the backyard. No one asked Chloe what she wanted. When Chloe asked why her graduation always had to disappear whenever Julian became angry, Diana spun around to face her. "You are so selfish. Your brother is showing signs of depression, and all you can think about is a party." Diana knew that Julian had never been diagnosed with anything. But she also knew that this kind of gaslighting had always been enough to silence Chloe. Julian came down the stairs with a smirk curling across his lips. "Your scholarship is nothing compared to the pressure a genius has to endure." Chloe looked at her brother, then at her parents. Richard avoided her eyes. Diana folded her arms and waited for Chloe to apologize. But this time, Chloe did not apologize. She placed the scholarship envelope on the table. The sound of paper touching wood was barely audible, yet the entire room suddenly fell silent. They still believed she was the weakest child in the family. They had no idea that Chloe already had a way out of that house, and she did not need anyone's permission to take it. The doorbell rang just as Richard was about to snatch the scholarship envelope from Chloe's hand. No one moved. Outside, the rain continued, pounding against the roof like cold fingers knocking against the flawless shell this family had spent years constructing. Diana went to open the door. Anger was still written across her face, but a second later, her entire expression changed. Arthur Sterling stood beneath the porch light. Chloe's grandfather was over 70 years old, with neatly combed silver hair, a straight back, and sharp eyes. It was as though his many years as an architect had taught him to see through every beautiful coat of paint and recognize the rotting foundation underneath. He held a small box wrapped in dark blue paper. He looked at Diana. "Where is everyone?" Diana hesitated. The party had to be cancelled. Chloe is not feeling well. Arthur turned his head and looked inside the house. Chloe stood beside the melting cake. A streak of white frosting stained her clothes. Julian leaned against the staircase with a contemptuous expression. Broken pieces of the ceramic vase were scattered across the floor. Arthur did not need to ask another question. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and placed the box on the table. Richard forced a smile. "You came without telling us." Arthur looked directly at his son-in-law. "If I had warned you, you might have had enough time to clean up the evidence." The room immediately fell silent. Richard explained that Julian had just suffered a serious shock. He had been fired, his mental state was unstable, and the entire family needed to make helping him through the crisis their first priority. Arthur looked Julian up and down. A 21-year-old man who destroys his home because he has been forced to answer for his own behavior is not a genius in crisis. He is an adult who has been raised to believe that everyone else must pay the price for him. Julian let out a dry laugh. "You do not understand the pressure my generation faces." Arthur did not become angry. It was his calmness that made Julian begin to lose confidence. "I understand pressure very well. I also understand the difference between someone who is struggling and someone who is a parasite." Diana stepped forward and placed herself in front of her son. "Dad, you cannot speak about Julian that way. He is extremely sensitive." Arthur turned toward her. "And what about Chloe?" Diana froze. That simple question left her unable to find an answer. Arthur looked at the old laptop sitting on the chair, then at the broken glass on the floor, the lights that had been hastily removed from the backyard, and the ruined cake meant to celebrate the valedictorian. "You are supporting a 21-year-old parasite by draining the strength from an 18-year-old child." Richard clenched his jaw. "You are exaggerating everything. We are only trying to protect Julian's future. He has real potential. He just needs more time and more resources." Resources. That single word made Arthur understand what Richard was truly afraid of. For months, Richard had repeatedly asked to borrow money from the family trust so he could expand the art gallery. He claimed the business was growing and that one investment would allow them to enter Portland's high-end art world. But Arthur had never agreed. Now Richard was not looking at him like a father trying to protect his family. He was looking at him like a debtor, terrified that the final door was about to close. Arthur turned toward Chloe. "Do you know why I came?" Chloe shook her head. He pulled a crumpled invitation from the pocket of his coat. "You sent me an invitation, but this afternoon, Richard told me that you were sick and did not want to see anyone." Chloe looked at her father. Richard avoided her eyes. The lie had been exposed far too easily. Arthur opened the box on the table. Inside was an old silver fountain pen engraved with Chloe's name. It was the gift he had received when he graduated from college. "I planned to give this to you in front of everyone." Chloe gently touched the box. Her throat tightened. It was not because the gift was expensive. It was because, for the first time that night, someone had remembered that this day belonged to her. Arthur pulled a car key from his pocket and placed it in Chloe's hand. "Do you want to leave this artificial glass cage?" Diana immediately stepped forward. "Dad, you cannot take her away because of one argument." Arthur looked at her. "This is not one argument. This is the result of years spent teaching Chloe that her worth must always come after Julian's feelings." Richard changed his tone. "Chloe, you are upset. Go upstairs and rest. We will talk about this tomorrow morning." But Chloe had heard that sentence too many times. Tomorrow morning always meant that everything would be buried and that she would be expected to apologize to keep the peace. This time, she turned around and walked upstairs. She collected her scholarship documents, her identification, a few essential clothes, and the notebook containing her enrollment plans. Her entire 18 years of life fit inside a single canvas bag. When Chloe came downstairs, Diana was no longer angry. She began to plead. "Leaving like this will give your grandfather the wrong impression. The gallery is at a very important stage. This family needs to stay united." Chloe understood that what her mother feared losing was not her daughter. She was afraid of losing the money. Julian folded his arms and gave her a cold smile. "Go ahead. Let us see how long you survive without Mom and Dad's money." Chloe stopped in front of her brother. At least I survive through my own ability, not by living off everyone else. The smile disappeared from Julian's face. Chloe walked outside with Arthur. It sounded like a lock had finally been opened. The first few days at Arthur's house were so quiet that Chloe found them frightening. There were no doors slamming in the middle of the night. There was no sound of Julian shouting because the internet was too slow. Diana no longer stood outside her room, reminding her to give in to her brother so the family could remain at peace. Every morning, Chloe woke in a small bedroom overlooking a garden filled with maple trees, and it took her several seconds to remember that she was no longer trapped inside that sweltering attic. Arthur never forced her to talk about what had happened. When he noticed her light still burning late at night, he simply left a cup of tea outside her door. He repaired an old study desk, bought her a laptop that met her needs, and cleared a drawer where she could safely store her enrollment documents. That ordinary kindness caused her more pain than she expected. Chloe realized she had lived inside a toxic family for so long that even the smallest acts of care made her suspicious. When Arthur asked what she wanted to eat, she immediately told him that anything was fine. When he asked her to choose a paint color for her room, she stood there in silence because she had never imagined that her preferences might matter. Healing did not happen in a single moment. It began when Chloe learned how to sleep without listening for footsteps in the hallway. It continued when she discovered that saying no did not automatically make someone angry. Little by little, she began to believe that she did not have to be useful in order to deserve love. It was also at Arthur's house that Chloe reunited with Lucas Bennett, the grandson of the neighbor next door. Lucas was studying law in Seattle and had returned to Portland for the summer. He had known Chloe when they were both children, before she became the girl who always lowered her head and apologized even when she had done nothing wrong. Lucas helped her review her enrollment documents, organize her financial paperwork, and understand every clause in her dormitory agreement. He did not pity Chloe. He treated her like someone who had the right to make her own decisions. That made her stronger with each passing day. But Richard and Diana refused to leave her alone. At first, their messages were gentle. "Mom misses you. Dad only wants the whole family to talk calmly. Julian is suffering because you left." When Chloe did not respond, their tone changed. "You are making your grandfather misunderstand this family. Because of you, he has frozen the financial support for the gallery. Do you have any idea how much pressure your parents are facing?" Arthur had formally refused to let Richard access the family trust. He had also demanded a review of every request for money that had ever been made in the name of helping the family. Richard panicked. Diana became furious. In their eyes, Chloe was no longer a daughter they wanted to bring home. She had become the reason their money had disappeared. After several days of silence, Chloe sent one message. "If you ever want me to see any of you again, Julian must get a job and move out of the house." No one replied. 2 days later, Chloe returned to her former high school to collect her graduation records. She saw Julian's car parked close to the curb. He stepped out before she had time to turn away. "You think you have won?" Julian approached her quickly. His face looked gaunt, and his eyes were red from several sleepless nights. He accused Chloe of manipulating Arthur, destroying the gallery's future, and stealing the investment money that should have belonged to him. Chloe stepped back. "I did not take anything from you, liar." Julian grabbed the strap of her bag. He insisted that their grandfather must have given Chloe a bank card or documents connected to the family trust. Chloe held tightly to the bag, but Julian was stronger. The fabric strap tightened painfully around her wrist. Another hand suddenly closed around Julian's arm. Lucas was standing behind him. "Let her go." Julian turned and tried to shove him, but Lucas did not move. "You are attempting to take someone's personal property and using force against her without her consent. The school cameras are recording everything. Would you like me to call the police right now?" The confidence on Julian's face began to falter. He released the bag, but he continued moving toward Chloe. "You will regret this. Without your family, you are nothing." This time, Chloe did not tremble. She took out her phone. The screen showed that the audio recording was still running. "Take one more step toward me, and this evidence will be sent directly to the Portland police." Julian looked at the phone. He looked at the camera above the school entrance. Then he looked at Lucas. For the first time, he understood that Chloe was no longer the younger sister he could intimidate by raising his voice. He stepped back. His car tore out of the parking lot with the engine roaring. That evening, Diana sent one final message. "You ungrateful little brat. How dare you threaten to have your own brother arrested? We have no daughter like you." Chloe read every word. Part of her still hurt. The child inside her, the one who had spent years waiting for her mother to enter the attic, still hoped the next message would contain an apology, but no apology came. Chloe blocked Diana's number. Then Richard's. Finally, Julian's. The screen fell silent. She put down her phone and walked into the garden, where Arthur and Lucas were sitting beneath the warm yellow lights. Chloe had once believed that leaving her family meant losing everything. That night, she understood that she had reclaimed the most important thing of all, the right to live her own life. 3 months after Chloe left, Richard's gallery lost its largest contract of the year. No one in the family called it a collapse. They continued posting perfectly edited photographs on social media. They continued writing about art, gratitude, and the strength of family unity. But behind the polished glass doors, everything was cracking faster than they could conceal it. When Chloe still lived at home, she had been the person who quietly kept everything functioning. She answered invitations, checked artwork delivery schedules, cleaned up after client receptions, and reminded Diana about important appointments. No one paid her. No one acknowledged her work. They simply called it the responsibility of being part of a family. Only after Chloe disappeared did the size of the emptiness she left behind become clear. Diana repeatedly forgot appointments with clients. Richard sent the wrong price list to a longtime collector. An exhibition had to be postponed because no one had checked the shipping documents. Rumors quickly spread through Portland's art community that the Sterling Gallery was in trouble. But the greatest blow came from Julian. After Arthur froze all financial support, Julian no longer had money to buy new equipment or pay his private debts. He demanded that Richard sell part of his personal collection to invest in a technology project that had never existed beyond a few presentation slides. Richard refused. Julian exploded. He smashed a display case inside the gallery in front of 2 clients. Someone recorded a short video, and it spread through a private group of local collectors. The image of the perfect intellectual family shattered within days. Richard blamed Diana for spoiling their son. Diana blamed him for failing to earn enough money to keep the family stable. Julian accused both of them of destroying his talent. Without Chloe standing between them and absorbing all their anger, they began attacking one another. Arthur knew everything, but he did not interfere. He only gave Chloe the gallery's financial report after she asked whether the business was truly in danger. She read every page in silence. Chloe felt no pleasure in watching her parents fail. She did not celebrate the knowledge that Julian was panicking. Even after blocking all communication, part of her still remembered the rare family dinners when they had laughed together. Healing did not mean that the memories disappeared. It meant that the memories no longer controlled her decisions. A few weeks later, Julian disappeared from Portland. He had borrowed money from several people to develop an unfinished application, then fled when his creditors began appearing at the gallery. Richard and Diana were forced to sell one of their smaller locations, reduce their staff, and move out of the large house that had appeared in hundreds of family photographs. Diana sent Arthur a long letter claiming that Chloe had destroyed everything. Arthur did not respond. Instead, he called Chloe into his study. On the desk were the trust documents Richard had tried to access for years. Chloe assumed Arthur only wanted to explain the family's financial situation, but he pushed the papers toward her. He had revised the terms governing the trust. After Chloe completed her education, she would become a joint trustee of the assets reserved for the next generation. Any financial support given to Richard, Diana, or Julian would have to be approved according to clearly defined standards of financial responsibility. Chloe stared at him, unable to speak. They had once treated her as the weakest child in the house, the one who should be grateful simply because she had been given a roof over her head, the one who had no right to speak. But in the end, Chloe became the person with the authority to decide whether that family would continue to have access to the wealth they had always assumed belonged to them. Arthur did not give her that power so she could take revenge. He gave it to her because she was the only person who understood the value of responsibility. Chloe signed the documents, but she did not use her new authority to hurt anyone. She established only one rule. No one would receive money while continuing to avoid the consequences of their own choices. That autumn, Chloe moved to Seattle. One afternoon, she sat on the university campus with Arthur and Lucas. The wind gently turned the pages of her new books. The rows of trees had begun to turn golden, and sunlight passed through the leaves before falling across the warm cup of coffee in her hands. Lucas asked whether she missed home. Chloe looked across the wide courtyard in front of her. She had once believed that home was the place where she had been born. Later, she understood that home should be the place where she did not have to make herself smaller so that someone else could feel larger. She had not left her family because she was cruel. She had left to overcome adversity, preserve her self-respect, and rescue the part of herself that had nearly been buried beneath years of psychological manipulation. Chloe smiled. For the first time, the future in front of her did not belong to Julian, Richard, or Diana. It belonged to her. And in the gentle light of that Seattle afternoon, Chloe finally understood what freedom truly meant. Sometimes, walking away is not an act of weakness. It is the first step towards saving yourself. Chloe's story reminds us that family should never require us to surrender our dignity, silence our pain, or become smaller so someone else can feel powerful. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you loved or leave a toxic relationship to protect your peace? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story may give someone else the courage they need today. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more emotional family stories.